In Genesis chapter 2, it says, "A man shall leave his father and his mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So the biblical cycle of life is that in every generation, kids leave the protection of their parents, attach themselves to their new life partner, forming a brand new family, and then eventually they will have children who will one day continue the cycle. This cycle is illustrated for us with the stories of the patriarchs in the Torah. In this week's Torah portion, Chayei Sarah, we read of the deaths of Sarah and Abraham. But before his death in Genesis 24, Abraham tasked his servant Eliezer with the job of finding a wife for his son Isaac. Abraham made Eliezer promise him, however, that he would not find a wife for Isaac among the Canaanites, but rather among Abraham's own people. This raises a couple of interesting questions. What role do parents have in finding a spouse for their child, and how important is it to find a spouse among people who share your worldview? Firstly, parents indeed do have a role in finding a spouse for their child. Primarily, parents have the incredible responsibility of raising their children in such a way that they become righteous, caring, and emotionally balanced people. More often than not, the people we attract or are attracted to are people who are like us. So if a person is to attract a spouse who is what God wants them to be, then the person has to be first what God wants them to be. But further than simply raising godly children, parents also have the responsibility to guard their children, to educate them on how to recognize in others a lack of virtue, and to encourage them to stay away from such people. Along those lines, parents should teach their children about true love and how to recognize in others the virtues that can lead to a real love-based relationship. Secondly, it is very important that a potential spouse be someone who shares your worldview. As believers, we are each on a journey of pursuing God's kingdom and its righteousness. We're thankful for the strength that God gives us on this journey, but we all know that attempting to live a life of obedience and imitation of the Messiah can still be a difficult task. Therefore, it is vital that we each marry a person who will support us on that journey. Marrying someone with different values and a different worldview can, at best, greatly impede our progress in our pursuit, and at worst, it can actually lead us completely astray. Knowing this, Abraham implored Eliezer to find a spouse for Isaac among his own people, among people who were not totally incompatible with Isaac. This sentiment was expressed by Paul when he said, "Do not be bound together with unbelievers, for what partnership have righteousness and lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness?" Thankfully, Eliezer found Rebekah, a pure woman with a servant's heart. She willingly went back with him and married Isaac. And the text then says, Isaac brought Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Thus the cycle of life continued, and God's people continued into the next generation. May we all be privileged to continue that cycle in our lives.